thought she'd found the love of her life, until one photograph tore her world apart. "You're my uncle." His hand, once brushing her cheek, froze mid-air, his eyes shattered. The man she had fallen for, the city's most feared and admired, was suddenly forbidden. The photograph quivered in her fingers, her father's handwriting blurred through her tears. "Protect her like blood, like family, Captain David Holmes." Choi Jun-young's voice cracked. "Rachel, please, let me explain." Seoul's skyline glittered beyond the windows, every light bearing witness as everything beautiful between them turned to ash. Before you go any further, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from right now, because missing a single twist in this story would be the biggest regret. And I promise, you don't want to miss what happens next. Who is he, really? And how far would love go when it's forbidden? Stay with us. Your next heartbreak and shocking revelation is just a click away. Rachel's fingers trembled as she pushed open the heavy glass door of Silhouette. 6 weeks earlier, she'd been someone else entirely. Someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be noticed, to be wanted. But tonight, wrapped in that emerald dress she'd hidden in the back of her closet for 3 years, she was stepping into a life she'd almost given up on. The boutique bar hummed with low jazz and the clink of crystal. Soft amber light pooled over velvet booths and polished mahogany. Rachel hadn't been anywhere like this since... when? Before Michael stopped looking at her like she mattered. Before the kids grew up and left. Before she became invisible. She smoothed the fabric over her hips. Suddenly self-conscious. What was she even doing here? A woman her age? Alone in a place like this? "That color is stunning on you." The voice came from her left. Deep, accented, kind. Rachel turned, and there he was. Jun-young stood near the bar, a glass of red wine in his hand, his dark eyes fixed entirely on her. Not a passing glance. Not the polite acknowledgement you give a stranger. He was seeing her. Really seeing her. Her breath caught. He was younger, maybe late 40s, with silver threading through his black hair and laugh lines that suggested he smiled often. He wore a charcoal sweater that fit like it was tailored just for him, and when he smiled it reached all the way to those warm, attentive eyes. Thank you," Rachel managed, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. When was the last time she'd blushed? "May I?" He gestured to the empty stool beside her at the bar. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He sat, angling his body toward her completely, as if nothing else in the room existed. "I'm Jun-young," he said, extending his hand. "Rachel." Her palm met his, and something electric passed between them. Or maybe she was imagining it. Maybe this was all some foolish... "You look like someone who's been hiding a secret," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. "Something beautiful you've kept locked away." Rachel's heart hammered. How could he possibly know? How could this stranger see straight through to the lonely woman who'd been disappearing piece by piece for years? "I don't usually do this," she whispered. "Come to places like this, alone. Then I'm lucky you chose tonight." His smile deepened. "And I promise you won't regret it." They talked. Oh God, they talked. About everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Seoul, about the architecture firm he'd started, about losing his wife 5 years ago to cancer and learning to live again. She told him about her children, grown now and scattered across the country, about her love of painting she'd abandoned, about feeling like she'd become a ghost in her own life. And he listened. Not the half-listening Michael did while scrolling his phone. Not the polite nodding of acquaintances. Jun-young leaned in. Ask questions. Remember details. When she mentioned her daughter's name, he repeated it later in conversation. When her voice cracked, Talking about her mother's passing, he reached across and squeezed her hand. For the first time in years, Rachel felt like she mattered. The hours melted, one drink became two. Two became dinner at a corner table. Dinner became shared dessert and coffee, and the kind of conversation that makes you forget time exists. "I don't want this night to end," Jun Young said finally, his thumb tracing lazy circles on the back of her hand. Rachel's pulse raced. Neither did she, and that terrified her. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Tomorrow?" She should say no. She should be careful. She should... "Yes," she breathed. His smile could have lit the whole city. As Rachel walked to her car that night, she felt 20 years younger, alive, electric, seen. She had no idea that the man watching her from the shadows across the street had just made a phone call, or that everything, absolutely everything, was about to shatter. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that Seoul had been softer than it should have been. Not the city itself. The street still pulsed with neon chaos. The subway still swallowed thousands at rush hour. And the language barrier still left her fumbling through convenience store transactions like a lost child. But somehow, in all those weeks she'd been navigating this foreign world alone, nothing had gone wrong. Not really wrong. The late night walk home from the library when those drunk men started following her. A taxi appeared out of nowhere, driver insisting she get in, refusing payment. The landlord who'd tried to charge her triple rent because she was foreign, suddenly apologetic the next day, offering the original price with a deep bow. That sketchy job interview in Gangnam that made her stomach twist with warning. The company shut down for violations before she'd even decided whether to go back. Coincidences. That's what she'd told herself, until the night she saw him. Jun Young was standing across the street from her apartment at 11 p.m., phone pressed to his ear, eyes scanning the building like a sentinel. Rachel froze in the shadow of the convenience store awning, heart hammering. He wasn't looking for her. He already knew exactly where she was. He was making sure she'd gotten home safely. When she confronted him the next morning at the cafe where they'd started meeting for language exchange, she expected him to deny it, to laugh it off, to make her feel paranoid. Instead, he set down his coffee with hands that trembled just slightly. "Your father asked me to watch over you." The words hit her like cold water. "My father's been dead for 6 months." "I know." His voice was steady, but something flickered behind his eyes. Grief, maybe, or guilt. "He called me 3 days before he passed. He knew you were coming to Seoul. He knew I was here." Rachel's throat tightened. Her father had been sick for so long, slipping away in increments. But he'd never mentioned Jun Young. Never mentioned knowing anyone in Korea who could help her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he didn't want you to feel obligated or controlled." Jun Young met her gaze, unflinching. "He said you needed to build your life here on your own terms. He just wanted insurance. Someone in the shadows, making sure you didn't fall through the cracks." "The taxi? The landlord? That company? I made calls, that's all." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I didn't interfere with your choices, Rachel. I just removed obstacles that weren't fair fights." She wanted to be angry, wanted to feel violated, manipulated, but all she could feel was the crushing weight of her father's love reaching across death itself, and the quiet devotion of a man who'd honored a promise without asking for anything in return. "How did you even know my father?" Jun Young's jaw tightened. "We served together. A long time ago, in a place neither of us talk about." He paused, something ancient and heavy settling over his features. "He saved my life, more than once. When he called and asked me to look after you, it wasn't a favor. It was a debt I could never repay." Rachel's vision blurred. She'd spent her whole adult life trying to escape her father's shadow, his expectations, his well-meaning interference. And here he was, even in death, wrapping her in invisible armor. But Jun Young hadn't smothered her. He'd given her space to stumble, to struggle, to grow, stepping in only when the danger was real. That was the difference. "You could have walked away," she whispered, "after he died. You didn't owe me anything." Jun Young's eyes softened, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw past the careful walls. "No," he said quietly. "I couldn't." The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken, and Rachel realized the guardianship had stopped being about her father a long time ago. The sky turned angry without warning. One minute Sarah was laughing at something he'd said, something silly about how he still couldn't work his smartphone, and the next, fat raindrops were hammering the windshield like bullets. The summer storm came out of nowhere, the way the best things in life always do. "Get in, get in!" Michael shouted over the sudden roar, fumbling with his keys as they both scrambled into his car. They were soaked in seconds. Sarah's hair stuck to her cheeks. His shirt clung to his chest. And then they were sitting there, breathless and dripping. And he looked at her with those warm eyes, and they both just burst out laughing. "I told you it was going to rain," she gasped between giggles. "You absolutely did not." "I said the clouds looked heavy. You said they looked interesting." He was grinning now, that boyish grin that made her stomach flip. "There's a difference." The rain drummed harder on the roof, cocooning them in their own little world. The parking lot outside disappeared behind sheets of water. Everything else disappeared too, her doubts, her fears. The voice in her head that kept saying she was too old for this, too broken, too late. It was just him, just them. The laughter faded slowly, replaced by something quieter, something that made her heart pound harder than the rain. "Sarah," he said softly. His hand found hers on the console between them. His thumb traced small circles on her palm. "I need to tell you something." Her breath caught. "Okay. I haven't felt this way in, God, I don't even know how long." He turned toward her, and she could see he was nervous. Actually nervous. This confident, gentle man who seemed so sure of everything was struggling to find words. "Since my wife died, I thought that part of my life was just over, done. I made my peace with it. I really did." She wanted to speak briefly, but her throat was too tight. "And then you walked into that cafe." His voice cracked just a little. "With your stories about terrible tenant and your terrible coffee order." "It's not terrible. It's objectively terrible." His smile was soft, but his eyes were serious. "You woke something up in me, Sarah. Something I thought was gone forever. And I'm scared to death, but I'm also so damn grateful." The rain was softer now, or maybe she just couldn't hear it anymore over the rushing in her ears. "Michael, But she never finished, because he leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. And she didn't. God help her, she didn't want to. His lips met hers so gently at first, like he was afraid she might shatter. But Sarah had been through hell and back. She wasn't made of glass anymore. She was made of something stronger, something that had survived and healed and was ready, finally ready, to feel again. She kissed him back, and it was nothing like she remembered kisses being. It wasn't the desperate, needy thing from her youth. It wasn't the obligatory gesture from a dying marriage. It was tender and passionate and real. It was two people who'd walked through fire and somehow found each other on the other side. It felt like coming home. It felt inevitable. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he whispered. Her heart stuttered. "Michael? Not like that. I mean, yes, maybe someday. But right now, I don't want this to end. Come have dinner. Let me make you something terrible because I can't cook. Let me show you my daughter's paintings. He swallowed hard. Let me see if this is real. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The sun was already breaking through the clouds, painting everything gold. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd been too afraid to hope for. But could she really do this? Could she really walk into his world, into his home, knowing that opening this door might mean risking everything all over again? Rachel's fingers brushed against something wedged between two old textbooks on the bottom shelf, something that didn't belong there. She pulled it out slowly, expecting a bookmark, maybe a forgotten receipt. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. It was a photograph, worn at the edges like it had been held too many times, stared at too long. A young woman smiled back at her from the glossy paper. Beautiful, radiant. Her hand resting gently on a very pregnant belly, eyes sparkling with the kind of joy that Rachel recognized because she'd felt it herself once. And beside her, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders, was Jun Young. Younger, yes, but unmistakably him. That same gentle smile, those same eyes. The room started spinning. Rachel sank onto the edge of the bed, the photograph trembling in her hands. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing, trying to find an explanation that wouldn't shatter everything she thought she knew. Maybe it was a sister, a cousin. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why her husband had hidden a picture of himself with a pregnant woman in a place he thought she'd never look. But deep down, in that terrible, knowing place in her gut, she already understood him. Rachel? She jumped at the sound of his voice. Jun Young stood in the doorway, frozen. His eyes locked onto the photograph in her hands, and the color drained from his face so quickly she thought he might collapse. What is this? Her voice came out smaller than she intended, fragile. He stepped into the room, his hands raised slightly, like he was approaching something wild and frightened. Rachel, please, let me explain. Who is she? The words cracked as they left her throat. Jun Young's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Her name was Min Seo. She was my wife. The floor seemed to drop out from under her. Was? She died. His eyes glistened with tears he was fighting to hold back. She and our daughter, during childbirth, 6 years ago. Rachel couldn't breathe. The man she'd married, the man she'd built a new life with, had carried this enormous grief in silence, had loved someone else so completely that even now, years later, he kept her hidden away like a secret treasure too precious to share. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out as a sob. Jun Young moved closer, dropping to his knees in front of her. His hands reached for hers, but she pulled away, clutching the photograph like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. I wanted to, he said desperately, tears now streaming freely down his face. So many times, I almost told you. But I didn't know how. I didn't know how to explain that His voice broke. I fell in love with you, Rachel. I fell so deeply in love with you. And I wasn't supposed to. I wasn't ready. I thought I would never be ready again. So you just... What? Pretended she never existed? No. The word came out fierce, pained. Never. I could never pretend that. But I was terrified that if you knew, you'd think you were just a replacement. That you'd never believe how much you mean to me. You're not her shadow, Rachel. You're not a substitute. What I feel for you is... He pressed his fist against his chest, struggling to find words big enough. It's real. It's everything. Rachel stared at him through blurred vision, her heart splitting in two directions at once. Part of her wanted to collapse into his arms, to comfort the broken man kneeling before her. But another part, a part that felt raw and exposed, couldn't stop wondering, had she ever really known him at all? I need to think, she whispered, standing on shaky legs. I can't do this right now. Rachel, please don't. But she was already walking toward the door, the photograph still clutched in her hand, leaving Junyoung on his knees in the silence of a room suddenly full of ghosts. Junyoung's hands were shaking when he finally said the words she'd been waiting to hear. I need to tell you something about your father, about me, about why I've carried this secret for so long. They sat across from each other in his small apartment, the city lights blinking through the window like stars that had fallen too close to earth. Min Seo's heart hammered against her ribs. Whatever he was about to say would change everything. She could feel it in the weighted silence between them. He took a breath that seemed to hurt. I'm not your uncle. Not by blood. The room tilted. Min Seo gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. What? Your father, his voice cracked, and she saw tears gathering in his eyes. This man who never cried. He saved my life when I was 7 years old. I was an orphan. My father was his military partner, his closest friend. They served together for years, trusted each other with their lives. Min Seo couldn't breathe, couldn't move. There was an ambush during a training exercise, Junyoung continued, the words spilling out now like he'd been holding them back for decades. My father threw himself in front of your father to shield him from the blast. He died in your father's arms. And his last words, he had to stop, pressing his palm against his eyes. His last words were, take care of my son. A sob escaped Min Seo's throat before she could stop it. Your father found me at the orphanage 3 weeks later. I was this broken, angry little boy who'd lost everything. And he looked at me with these eyes full of grief and determination, and he said, you're coming home with me. Your family now. But why? Min Seo's voice was barely a whisper. Why call you uncle? Why lie? It wasn't a lie to him. Junyoung's tears were falling freely now, and so were hers. He wanted to honor my father's memory. He wanted me to have dignity, a place in the family. Uncle wasn't about blood. It was about respect. About giving me a title that meant I belonged, that I mattered. In his mind, making me your uncle was the highest honor he could give me. Min Seo's whole body was trembling. So we're not actually related? No. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and pain. But I've spent my entire adult life believing I had no right to love you the way I do. Your father asked me to watch over you, to protect you. How could I betray that trust by wanting more? He's gone, Junyoung. Her voice broke on his name. And he would never want you to sacrifice your happiness for a promise made out of grief. He reached across the table, his fingers stopping just inches from hers, like even now he was afraid to cross that final line. Every time I looked at you, I saw his face, his trust, his belief that I would do right by you. How do I reconcile loving you with honoring him? Maybe. Min Seo's hand moved forward, closing the distance he couldn't. Their fingers touched, and she felt electricity shoot through her entire body. Maybe loving me is honoring him. Maybe he brought you into our lives knowing that someday we'd be exactly what each other needed. Junyoung stared at their joined hands like he was seeing a miracle. I don't know if I can forgive myself, he whispered. Then let me help you. She squeezed his fingers, holding on like she'd never let go. Let us figure this out together. He looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw fear and hope and something else, something that made her heart stop and restart all at once. But before he could speak, his phone buzzed violently on the table between them. He glanced at the screen, and every drop of color drained from his face. What? Minseo's stomach dropped. What is it? It's your mother, he breathed. She knows. Rachel's hands were still warm from Junyoung's touch when she turned the key in her apartment door. 3 hours ago, they'd sat across from each other at that little cafe, and for the first time in weeks, she'd felt something like hope. He'd listened, really listened, and when he'd reached across the table and squeezed her hand, she'd almost believed they could find their way back to each other. But the door wouldn't open all the way. Something was blocking it from the inside. Rachel's stomach dropped. She pushed harder, heard the scrape of furniture against hardwood, and that's when the smell hit her, sharp and chemical, like someone had been looking for something they had no right to find. The apartment looked like it had been gutted, couch cushions slashed open, their stuffing scattered like snow, drawers yanked out and dumped. Her books, every single one swept off the shelves and lying face down on the floor like broken birds. The kitchen cabinets hung open, contents spilled everywhere. Even the photos on her wall had been ripped down, frames smashed, glass glittering across the carpet. Rachel stood frozen in the doorway, her purse slipping from her shoulder. This wasn't a burglary. Burglars took things. Whoever did this was searching for something or sending a message. Her phone. She needed to call the police. Her hands shook as she fumbled for it, but then she saw what was waiting on her coffee table, the only surface in the entire apartment that hadn't been touched. A single photograph, face up, perfectly centered. Rachel's legs went weak. It was Simone. Her sister was caught mid-laugh in the photo, sitting outside her favorite brunch spot in Brooklyn, the one with the blue awning she always posted about on Instagram. The image was recent, maybe from last weekend, but someone had drawn a red circle around Simone's face, thick, deliberate, like a target. Underneath the photo, written in block letters on a plain white card, "We have her. Stop asking questions." The world tilted. Rachel grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. No. No, no, no. Not Simone. Simone had nothing to do with any of this. Simone didn't even know about the files, about Marcus, about any of it. She was just Rachel's little sister, the one who sent her memes at 2 a.m. and called her every Sunday without fail. Rachel's phone buzzed in her hand. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello? Silence. Then breathing, slow, controlled. Simone? Rachel's voice cracked. Simone? Are you there? Your sister's fine. A man's voice, low, flat, no accent she could place. For now, Rachel's fear ignited into something else entirely, something hot and sharp and absolutely unyielding. If you hurt her, you're not in a position to make threats, Ms. Chen. The voice was almost bored. You've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. We gave you warnings. You didn't listen. What do you want? Rachel forced the words out through clenched teeth. The files you downloaded from Marcus Webb's computer, all of them, every copy, every backup. You have 48 hours. I don't have them anymore. I turned them over to, we know what you turned over. That wasn't everything. Apage pause. 48 hours, Ms. Chen. We'll be in touch with instructions. And if you contact the police, the FBI, or anyone else who might think they can help you. The voice dropped even lower. Well, your sister's a pretty girl. It would be a shame if something happened to that pretty face. The line went dead. Rachel stood there, phone pressed to her ear, every muscle in her body coiled tight. For weeks, she'd been running, hiding, waiting for someone else to fix this mess, hoping Junyoung would understand, praying the authorities would protect her. But they'd taken Simone, and Rachel was done being afraid. She looked down at the photograph one more time, at her sister's bright, beautiful smile, and something fundamental shifted inside her chest. Whoever these people were, whatever they wanted, they'd made a mistake. They thought fear would break her. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Rachel wasn't asking for permission. She was telling him. "I'm going with you," she said, her voice steady as steel. "Don't even think about leaving me behind." Junyoung's jaw tightened. He turned away from her, staring out at the darkening sky beyond the window. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. "Absolutely not." "Junyoung? No." He spun back to face her, and there it was, that look she'd seen 1,000 times before. The one that said he'd walk through fire to keep her safe. The one that made him her protector, her shadow, her wall against the world. "This isn't some board meeting, Rachel. These people are dangerous. You have no idea what they're capable of." "Then tell me," she shot back. "Stop treating me like I'm made of glass." He shook his head, something almost desperate flickering across his face. "Your father made me promise. My father's gone." The words came out sharper than she intended, and she saw him flinch. She softened, just slightly. "He's been gone for years, Junyoung, and you've kept that promise. God knows you have, but I'm not a little girl anymore." "I know that." His voice dropped low, rough around the edges. "Do you?" Rachel stepped closer, refusing to let him retreat. "Because right now, you're still seeing that scared 16-year-old who needed someone to stand between her and the world. That's not who I am anymore." The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one, like stars finding their way home. "You don't understand," Junyoung finally said, and for the first time since she'd known him, he sounded tired. "If something happened to you, if I failed to protect you, you've spent your entire life protecting me, because you promised my father," Rachel interrupted, her voice gentle but unwavering. She reached out, placing her hand over his. "Now let me stand beside you, because I choose to." His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for fear, for any reason to push her away. But she held his gaze, letting him see exactly what she was made of. The strength he'd helped build in her. The courage that had been there all along, waiting for its moment. "This isn't your burden alone," she continued. "Not anymore. They took my company. They threatened everything we've built together. You think I can just sit in some safe house while you risk your life to fix it? That's not who we are. That's not who I am." Something shifted in his expression. The protective wall he'd built around her, around himself, began to crack, not breaking exactly, transforming. "You could get hurt," he said quietly. "So could you." She squeezed his hand. "And if you walk into this alone and something happens, if I lose you because you were too stubborn to let me help," her voice caught, "I'll never forgive myself, or you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That's not fair. Life's not fair." She smiled back, but there were tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "You taught me that." Junyoung was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. The gesture was simple, but it meant everything. "You follow my lead," he said. "Every step, no improvising. Deal. And if I tell you to run, don't push it," Rachel warned. He almost laughed. Almost. But then his expression grew serious again, his grip on her hand tightening. "Then we do this together. As equals." "As equals," she echoed. Neither of them mentioned what they both knew, that walking into this together meant they could lose everything together. But Rachel had made her choice, and Junyoung had finally respected it. Now they just had to survive what came next. Rachel had spent her whole life believing she wasn't brave. Not really. She was the quiet one, the careful one, the woman who double-checked locks and avoided confrontation and let other people handle the hard things. But standing in that Busan compound, with chaos erupting around her, something shifted deep in her chest. The armed men had come out of nowhere. 3 of them, moving fast through the corridors with weapons drawn. Jun-young had pushed her behind him instinctively, his body a shield, but Rachel's mind was already racing. Simone was somewhere in this building, alone, vulnerable, and these men weren't here to negotiate. "Stay behind me," Jun-young commanded, his voice tight with protective fury. But Rachel didn't stay behind him. When one of the intruders lunged toward them, she grabbed the closest thing she could find, a heavy ceramic vase from the hallway table, and swung it with every ounce of strength she had. The crash echoed through the corridor. The man stumbled backward, cursing, blood streaming from his temple. Jun-young stared at her for half a second, stunned. "Where's Simone?" Rachel demanded, her voice sharper than she'd ever heard it. No trembling, no hesitation, just fierce, crystalline focus. They moved together then, a unit forged in crisis. Jun-young took down another attacker with brutal efficiency while Rachel searched room after room, her heart hammering, but her hands steady. She'd never felt more terrified. She'd never felt more alive. And then she heard it, a muffled cry from behind a locked storage room door. "Simone!" Rachel's voice cracked with desperation. She threw her shoulder against the door once, twice, ignoring the pain shooting down her arm. It wouldn't budge. Jun-young appeared beside her, breathing hard, a cut above his eyebrow. He didn't ask questions. He just kicked the door with enough force to splinter the frame, and it burst open. Simone was huddled in the corner, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror that melted into disbelief when she saw Rachel. Not Jun-young. Rachel. The woman she probably thought would faint at the first sign of danger. Rachel rushed forward, her fingers fumbling but determined as she untied the ropes. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I've got you. You're safe now." Simone collapsed into her arms, sobbing, and Rachel held her tight, stroking her hair like she would a frightened child. In that moment, something ancient and powerful surged through her. A mother's instinct, a warrior's resolve, a love so fierce it could move mountains. "We need to move," Jun-young urged, his hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Now." They ran together through the compound, Simone between them, Rachel guiding her with gentle firmness even as gunshots echoed somewhere behind them. She didn't freeze. She didn't panic. She just kept moving, kept thinking, kept protecting. When they finally burst through the exit into the night air, police sirens wailing in the distance, Rachel's legs nearly gave out. But she stayed upright, strong, because Simone needed her to be. Jun-young pulled them both close, his arms wrapped around them like a fortress, his voice rough with emotion. "You were incredible," he said against Rachel's hair. "Do you understand me? You were incredible." Rachel closed her eyes, breathing hard, her whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. But underneath the fear, underneath the exhaustion, she felt something new blooming in her chest. Pride. She'd done it. She'd saved someone. She'd fought back. She'd been brave when it mattered most. Maybe she'd always had this courage inside her. Maybe it had just been waiting for the right moment, the right reason, the right love worth fighting for. But as the police vehicles screeched into the compound and officers swarmed the building, Rachel noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the attackers was missing, and in the chaos of their escape, no one had seen where he went. Rachel's hands trembled as she pushed open the hospital room door. The smell of antiseptic and clean linens filled her nose, but all she could see was Simone, her baby sister, propped up against pillows, pale but smiling. Alive, safe. The monitors beeped steadily beside her bed, a rhythm Rachel had been terrified she'd never hear again. "You came back?" Simone whispered, reaching out one weak hand. Rachel crossed the room in 3 steps and took it, sinking into the chair beside the bed. Of course I came back. You scared me half to death. Simone's laugh was soft, fragile. I'm okay now, really. Her eyes, those same hazel eyes they'd inherited from their mother, searched Rachel's face. But you're not here to stay, are you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. How could she explain? How could she tell Simone that while she'd been sitting on that plane, white-knuckled and terrified, something inside her had shifted? That seeing her sister's name on her phone screen had made her realize how quickly everything could vanish, and how much time she'd already wasted living someone else's version of her life? I don't know what I'm doing, Rachel admitted, her voice breaking. I just know I can't go back to pretending anymore. Simone squeezed her hand with surprising strength. Then don't. But you need me. The bakery needs me. Everyone, stop. Simone's voice was firm despite her weakness. Rachel, listen to me. You spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Mom, Dad, me. That horrible excuse of a husband. She paused, catching her breath. When are you going to take care of yourself? Tears blurred Rachel's vision. It feels selfish. It's not selfish. It's survival. Simone's eyes glistened. You think I haven't noticed? How you smile but your eyes are empty? How you talk about the bakery like it's a prison sentence? She pulled Rachel closer. I love you, which means I want you to be happy. Really, truly happy. And if that happiness is halfway across the world with a man who looks at you like you hung the moon, then go. But what if I'm making a mistake? What if you're not? Simone interrupted. What if this is the one chance you get to choose the life you actually want, instead of the life everyone expects you to have? A tear slipped down her cheek. I'll be fine. The bakery will survive. And you? You deserve to finally live. Rachel broke down then, sobbing into her sister's shoulder while Simone stroked her hair like she had when they were little girls afraid of thunderstorms. When Rachel finally pulled away, Simone was smiling through her own tears. Now get out of here before I change my mind and guilt you into staying. The flight back to Seoul felt different this time. Rachel didn't sleep. She watched the sun rise over the Pacific, painting the clouds in shades of coral and gold, and felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Hope. Real, terrifying, beautiful hope. And Jun-young was waiting at their spot along the Han River when she texted him. He turned, and the expression on his face when he saw her, relief, joy, disbelief, made her knees weak. She didn't say anything. She just walked into his arms and let him hold her while the Seoul sunset painted the sky in gold and pink. I'm staying, she whispered against his chest. Not forever, not perfectly, but I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing me. His arms tightened around her. We'll figure it out. Together. And as the city lights began to twinkle to life around them, Rachel realized something profound. She wasn't running away from her old life. She was running toward her true life. The one she'd been too afraid to claim. The one that had been waiting for her all along. But starting over isn't simple, and Seoul had one more surprise waiting that would test everything she'd just decided. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves. Sometimes love means letting go of what's safe and reaching for what makes us feel alive. Rachel taught us that it's never too late, whether you're 50, 60, or beyond, to rewrite your story. Your happiness still matters. Your dreams still count. Sometimes choosing love isn't selfish. It's the most courageous act of all. We're taught that being a good woman means sacrifice, means always saying yes to everyone but ourselves. But real love, the kind that fills you up instead of draining you dry, that's worth fighting for. And sometimes the life you're supposed to live looks nothing like the life you planned. And that's more than okay. That's beautiful. Rachel's journey reminds us that second chances are real, that fresh starts can happen at any age, and that love, true love, is always worth the risk. Thank you so much for watching Rachel's story with me. If her journey touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, you're going to want to see what Soul has in store for her. See you in the next video.